And Alicia's from California said, Trina, thank you so very, very, very much for sharing your magic. Hope for the Flowers saved my sanity while I was in college. You are such a blessing. Many blessings to you.
Now, for me, it's hard to know how to handle all that. You know, that's just, I feel it was a gift of God. It wasn't me. It just, I seem to have been in the right place at the right time and able to do it. I just come back from Egypt and was evacuated during the 67 war. And ended up in Paris at our international center. And I was there during the revolutionary days in 1968 in May, when all the students were protesting. And it was such a big year. Martin Luther King was killed. Robert Kennedy was killed. Here in the United States, people were talking revolution every place. And I went to I went to Belgium. I heard that the artists had occupied the main museum in Brussels. And I thought, gotta see this. So I went as an artist to Brussels, and I was in there. Can you imagine the main room of the Metropolitan Museum or some big museum with all the famous paintings on the wall and a bunch of kids sleeping in sleeping bags on the floor? That's what this was. So I got in there. They wouldn't let me stay overnight. I think they were afraid that if something might happen, the police would come and this American woman, but they gave me hospitality. And I asked one of the young men there, do you really think if you destroy the whole old order, that something good would come? And he said, yes. And, you know, I'm just starting to think about what revolution means. And so I then was brought back from Paris in 1969. And in the summer of 1969, I met a priest from Paulist Press. And I had written this book in 1965 before I went about a theology of hope, using the work of Teilhard de Chardin, the hope forward and the hope upward. And it was a simple thing. It was hand lettered. It was, you can see the sources, the beginnings of the Hope for the Flowers style in this book, but it wasn't like that. It was different. And I came back and he said, come back. I was carrying the manuscript around that I found in a closet in Paris, because that's where I'd sent it for an International Grail meeting, and nobody was using it. So I picked up my manuscript and took it back with me, and I carried it around with me. I didn't have any plans about what to do with it. But when this person from Paulist Press, a publishing house, came up to the booth, I said, do you ever read manuscripts? He says, well, give it to me. I'll read it overnight. So he wrote it in the hotel, and the next morning he came back to the booth and said, when you get back to New York, come and see us. So I did, and they gave me a contract. Now, I've never done a contract. I'd never done anything like this. I wasn't planning to write a book or anything. So I took this contract, and I was in deep culture shock, folks, coming back to the United States after being in Egypt, where some of the girls' fathers were making $50 a year. Yeah. Back to the riches of this country, which that's where my culture shock wasn't going to Egypt. It was coming
back. Yep.
Yeah, it was coming back. And so there was a psychologist in Connecticut who was willing to see me for nothing. So I take the bus there, and I saw where he was, and then I walked around to try to find a place, and I found this $10 a week room where I stayed and did this with him and started to work in the first book. But boy, have I changed, you know. It's now 1965. I've been through the poverty of Egypt. I've been through the revolutionary times in Paris and Europe. And now I'm back in the United States. And so this second effort got bigger and bigger and bigger, with more and more pictures and everything, and more developing all that stuff. And then one day, just 50 years ago, this month, those caterpillars, which were the cover already of anything about hope for me, they were always with the symbol of hope, the caterpillars and the butterfly and such. They seemed to want their own book. So I sat all day long and wrote without stopping for lunch or anything. And it's very much the way it was that day, with important edits made and important changes, about 10%, but it was there. Yes.
All in one day, 90% of it.
90% of it was one day. And that's very unusual for me.
Sounds like a channel to me.
It certainly does.
It really feels like that to me too. And so, and the editor said, oh, no, 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 no. I had a real hard time getting them to take this book instead, but it's the best-selling book they've ever had.